You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News, the news show that brings you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. Okay, and now we're very happy to welcome to the show for the first time Jay Jacobs, who has been the Nassau County Democratic Chairman since 2001 and who also became chair of the New York State Democratic Committee for a second time in 2019. Well, we want to thank you again for joining us, and I'm sure your schedule's got to be busy. Anybody with all that on their plate, but there are plenty of topics to discuss. I guess before we go into the other priorities of the Democratic Party, first we wanted to get your thoughts on the Long Island Democratic Party electeds and the response to Blakeman's executive orders. They're in court now, I think, as we speak, but...
That's exactly right. Look, I think Bruce Blakeman is playing to his right-wing base. And at the end of the day, the appellate division is going to uphold the mask mandate. You know, what troubles me about all of this is that it is so blatantly political. Look, I've been vaccinated. I've got the booster. I've gone the whole 9 yards, and my family the same. So I'm in favor of vaccines. But I can understand, particularly for parents of young children, how they might be concerned about the vaccines or have hesitation. There's a lot of information out there. I don't agree or believe all of it's true, but neither here nor there, there's enough that can give a parent concern. So I understand not wanting a vaccine mandate and not wanting to be required to have it for your child in particular. That I get. Right. As for masks, let's think about this for 2 seconds. I've heard people say it violates their constitutional rights. Well, does having to put a seatbelt on in your car to drive on the highway violate your constitutional right? Does it violate your constitutional right not to be able to smoke a cigar in the restaurant next to me when I'm having my meal? This is about the fact that we live in a community, that we have this pandemic out there that, by the way, Bruce Blakeman, let me remind you, it's really killing real people. You had a member of your Republican Party leadership team, worked at the Board of Elections, a great man at the Board of Elections, Republican, who chose not to be vaccinated, I believe, but died of this virus. And you know, what we're asking is that people put a mask on to help ensure that you don't spread it further. And masks do help contain the virus and the spread. So this isn't about your constitutional rights. Yeah, this is about community. It's about helping one another out. And by the way, all of these people that are complaining about masks, thank God they weren't around during World War II when people really had to make a sacrifice. So, you know, this is all nonsense and politicizing this matter. And I think Bruce Blakeman should be ashamed of himself. Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm surprised that this is the hill these people want to die on. You know, with literally. Right,
yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yeah. But with all the issues that we face, I mean, you open a newspaper and you can go 3 pages and you've already got a plate full of junk that is incredible. But this is the hill they want to die on. You know, we asked these questions and the response we got was, well, look at the science. And our take on this was, you know what? In this instance, let's just forget the science and talk about common sense. And any kindergarten kid knows that if he's going to walk in a classroom and he's about to sneeze, he's going to put his hand over his face. I mean, that's elementary, you know, and yet, no, look at the science. No, I don't need to look at science. I'm looking at this, and the results are only going to be negative. You know, now I understand the herd immunity and all that stuff, but you still have, you know, families that have very young children, and now we're seeing the results of some of that.
Yeah, you still have immunocompromised individuals, of course. You know, throughout with this pandemic is as real as it ever has been.
You know, But what we were disappointed in was the idea that okay, we understood nobody wants mandates, fine, but could you recommend to the citizens of Nassau County that maybe they should wear a mask when it's appropriate? When it's not, fine. You want to walk on the beach, knock yourself out. And we all kind of know that. We've been living with this thing for 2 years, so we all know what our boundaries are. Some people don't care. They invite 20 people over their house and then read about the results 2 days later in the paper. Yeah, he's in the hospital.
That's the thing. Exactly, Bill. Like we've said, and like we've spoken with both the, current, obviously county executive, but also with the holdover health commissioner, Dr. Larry Eisenstein, and a number of medical health professionals on the front lines from Northwell and from the other local regional hospitals.
Dr. Ukasari,
they see it differently than, of course, he does, and they definitely don't like this idea of politics getting involved in public health, which has been an issue throughout this pandemic. Maybe there was a little window at the beginning when everyone came together, but then we saw the disinformation. We saw a lot of this kind of organizing to the least common denominator, and we even see this borne out in some of these school board meetings that we see here on Long Island, which we've talked to the school district superintendents about how tough that is to have to manage now families fighting over masks, and all these other types of things. So all that said, there is this obviously tangible potential physical impact, health-wise from this decision, but there's also potential political blowback in terms of what this means, this back and forth and this adversarial position the county has taken towards Governor Hochul and towards defying, that order and, just kind of seeming to double down to Bill's point. So what are your thoughts about that? I know we asked him directly, and we've talked to Yancey Roy and others from Newsday about, will this impact, school funding, the budget, anything like that? That's a concern I'm sure parents have.
No, I really don't think it will. I mean, I know Governor Hochul very well, and she's both practical and rational, and she's certainly not going to punish the citizens of Nassau County for the transgressions of the county executive. I mean, that's not how she plays. The budget I think that she's put forward is going to be very beneficial to the citizens here on Long Island, particularly the school districts. We've got a 7% education fund increase coming, and that should be a real relief for property taxpayers. That's coming directly from the state. That was something that I know the 5 members of our state Senate delegation, the Democrats, were arguing for and advocating for very strongly. So I think there'll be a lot of benefits, and Kathy Hochul is not going to punish anybody over Bruce Blakeman's nonsense.
Okay, fair enough. That's good to know. Just because he obviously doubled down and said that that's kind of what he anticipated, but it's good to hear that parents can have reassurance that they won't be kind of potentially the collateral damage of any potential political kind of dispute there. So that's good to know. Let's remind our listeners, they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College. Here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and also still joined by the New York State and Nassau County Democratic Party Chairman Jay Jacobs. So to the point that you just raised, the budget, of course, that's big news. That is certainly one of the most important parts of governance in the state. And the governor, Kathy Hochul, who's made history in being the first, female governor in the state, had her State of the State address, and all that's out there now for people to look over. So can you tell us some of those main priorities and some of the things you think will really impact Long Island? I know, like you said, record foundation aid to schools. People talk about the POP program. Some of the other things maybe you think that might help Long Islanders.
Yeah, look, I think her funding for helping out with the healthcare industry and for nurses and the rest is going to be very, very beneficial. Look, we've got a lot of infrastructure money coming our way as well. And there are a whole host of programs that have been put forward by this governor in the budget. I'm particularly excited about what she's doing for the schools. I think that I think will be the thing that hits taxpayers in Nassau County and Suffolk County probably in a positive way the best. And so I think across the board, we're doing a lot of good. I think that she's continuing capital programs. We just saw, another one of the terminals opened at LaGuardia. We're doing a lot of work at Kennedy. You're going to see Penn Station revitalization. A lot of Long Islanders go in and out of Penn Station. We're going to get that cleaned up. So the governor is on this task, and we've got, funding for other programs that help reduce crime, get guns off the street. people don't think of, a suburban community like Nassau or Suffolk as being a place where you have to worry about that. But you go to communities like Wyandanch and Hempstead and Uniondale, Roosevelt, and there's a real threat from gun violence, and we've got to handle that. And there's gang issues as well. And I know that the governor is very well focused on those things too, that help make Long Island a safer place for everybody.
Okay, yeah, and certainly you hit on an issue that's certainly front page right now in terms of what can we be done to curb gun violence, whether it's the tragedy that happened in New York City with the officers who fatally were killed, and the funerals are today, for one of the officers. And the fact is that I know the Mayor Adams, has met and is in discussions with both the state delegation, the governor, and president even, and the federal members of the state's delegation here in terms of what can be done. New York State has a lot of strong, kind of gun control measures, but people talk about this iron pipeline. People talk about what can be done in these other states that we don't have control of their state legislatures, essentially. And that's not even to say what people think about the Senate and Congress moving on policy that way. So what are your thoughts, I guess, for the prospects going forward, hopefully?
Well, that's got to be a federal solution to that. So because you said it just right, you can't rely upon states with Republican legislature majorities or governors getting any help, giving us any help on guns. But here's an interesting thing, and I want everybody to think about this. So we lost an election in 2021 here in Nassau County. And one of the overriding issues you heard about, I don't know if it was determinative, but it certainly was impactful, was the Republicans' charges about the bail reform. And they painted a picture that made it sound like all the crime that's happening now in New York, coming to Nassau County soon, is all about bail reform, the Democrats being weak on crime and giving away the store and letting these hardened criminals out with no bail to go commit crimes again, violent crimes again, and all the rest. That's the narrative. That's what you heard. And I will admit to you that there may have been one or two examples, and I mean one or two, maybe it was three, where not in Nassau necessarily, but maybe there was someone who was released without bail, maybe properly or improperly based upon the new law, and may have committed a violent crime. And that's so. But for the rest of it, I would say to you, it's been fairly successful and appropriate, although the law needs a couple of tweaks, and Democrats have been saying that. But here's my point. This is a nationwide problem, this crime problem, this violence problem. It's not just in New York. So how did New York's bail reform affect the crime in Chicago? I'd love to know. How did it affect the increase in crime in the central cities in Atlanta and LA and the rest of it? So it's pure nonsense to blame bail reform. And the audacity of these Republicans who have sat on their hands and done nothing in the face of a mounting gun violence, when I'll tell you, while I admitted that 2 or 3, perhaps, people were subject to violence, and I don't like it, and I'm not excusing it under the bail reform matter, we're losing thousands. All right, I think it's thousands of people a year. I've heard numbers like 30,000 a year on gun violence. Republicans do nothing. It's not important. They're silent. And they hide behind this nonsense of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment doesn't allow people the right to walk around with handguns or automatic and semi-automatic rifles and all the rest of it. That's nonsense. And this is something where, Republicans put their head in the sand. They use the line, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Oh, come on. I would say to you, there are a variety of ways to kill people, but far too many of them are being killed by guns. Republicans are doing nothing. Don't talk to me about bail reform until you do something about gun violence and that kind of reform.
Okay, fair enough. Point made, definitely. And the fact that
we made it a point to bring up that idea, because the bail reform, it's such a big political football, I guess, because everybody's throwing it at each other. We made the point to say that, listen, somebody didn't just wake up one morning and say, I think I got a great idea. I'm going to let criminals out of jail with no bail. How's that? No, it happened because of the number of cases where people sat on, as far as New York, Rikers Island for 3 years. One kid was accused. He wasn't even found guilty of anything. And he sat there for 3, they forgot about him. So something had to be done. So the bail reform law, and when you talk nationally, I'll bet that this same thing exists right across the country. How many people are there sitting in jail cells that really don't belong there? They never should have been there in the first place. So to that end, we have the bail reform law, but the problem is we can't get people to come together and say, let's chisel this down to a thing that we both agree works.
And to your point, Bill, and I know obviously you could tell us more, Jay, in terms of the Democratic conference. My understanding was from Yancey Roy, who we spoke with. They did go back to the table and they added some more bailable offenses, kind of put it in layman's terms. And I know, like we said, that the mayor of New York City is seemingly pushing with one of the candidates in the governor's race, I believe, as well, and some others for trying to include, I believe, basically more discretion, but there was a specific term in terms of dangerousness or something along those lines. Right. Yeah, exactly. But versus, kind of knowing what the goal and the intent was. And I saw that the governor strongly kind of said that, we agree with the mission of it, and it may not be perfect, but, it doesn't seem like that's back on the table for too many changes. So, maybe what is the read, I guess, to the extent you can tell us on what seems to happen next in this process? Well,
it's going to have to go before the state Senate and Assembly. And I think that there'll be discussion on that. And of course, there's hesitation among many who are supportive, as I am supportive, of criminal justice reform. But I think this issue of dangerousness needs to be properly defined, gives the judges more discretion, and should happen. I think that's certainly something we need to do. But let's understand something. The problem we have as Democrats is that we take a look at problems and we try to find solutions. This is a real problem, and I think you articulated it well a few moments ago about people rotting in jail, frankly, having not been convicted of anything, but just accused, and even being pressured to cop a plea to something just to get out of there, even when they didn't do it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have money and you could post bail, and we're talking about minor nonviolent offenses. We're not talking about, murdering your wife. We're talking about somebody, who may have shoplifted or done something else, been caught for it. And, look, what do we want? What's the outcome we want? We want less crime. We want less violence. That is really what we're looking for. And if that's what you want, how do you get there? And the answer certainly isn't by putting more people in jail to learn better how to become better criminals, right, which often happens in jail. Mm-hmm. It's about rehabilitation. It's about finding other things aside from incarceration where it's possible. It also saves taxpayer money because it's expensive to have somebody sitting in jail. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is necessity and where you want to go. Democrats look for solutions like that. Republicans sit back. They go with the old adage, if you do nothing in politics, you rarely get into trouble. But it gives them the opportunity to paint a negative narrative and attack whatever it is Democrats do to try to fix a problem while offering no solutions of their own. Yeah. Take a look at healthcare. All the years they condemned they called Obamacare in Washington and said, we need to change it. We've got a better plan. This is terrible. So they're in power with Trump and a majority in the Senate and the House. They didn't come up with one idea to change healthcare. They don't promote a single thing to improve the lives of a single person other than to reduce taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Mm-hmm. Now, again, unfortunately, that gives us a disadvantage because Democrats do come up with ideas. And you're right. We don't just come out of, off the top of our heads. They're studied and the rest, and they're not perfect. And sometimes we make mistakes. I'll give you that. But we're doing it for the purpose of trying to improve people's lives, not let them rot.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And to your point, Jay, we'd spoken with Commissioner Ryder from the NCPD last week, and, he even acknowledged and, kind of conceded that the bail reform, he understands the principles of it. He sees why it's valuable, considering that, you put people into this environment and a lot of times they're worse off than they came in, basically, so that's one thing. But then another thing that, was interesting because he basically agreed with the statistics that I know the former county exec, Curran, had stated regarding Nassau County being, quote, the safest county of its size in terms of, gun violence and other things. But when we asked that same question to the executive now, Blakeman, he disagreed with this police commissioner. So I feel like, how do we kind of rectify that when, people even who work together so intimately on an issue are in disagreement on that kind of basic fact?
Well, look at the difference. The police commissioner, Pat Ryder, he's professional. He's a professional law enforcement officer. He's in the system. He gets the data. He gets the reports on a day-to-day basis. He knows what he's talking about. Bruce Blakeman is a politician who's looking to build support and hopefully in 3 or so years get reelected. He plays to his base. Yeah. If his base is thinking there's more crime, it's better for him. Remember the Republican playbook. It works well in every election for them. Republicans either try to scare the public or make them angry. That motivates their vote. Mm-hmm. That's what they do. So here he's trying to scare the public. We're in danger. There's crime. Democrats are giving away the store, letting the hardened criminals out. They're hiding behind every tree in front of every schoolyard that your child attends. Mm-hmm. And you better vote them down and give the vote to Republicans because we're going to keep you safe. Yeah. Safe from what? Mm-hmm. Laura Curran did a fabulous job. The police department did a fabulous job in Nassau County for these 4 years. People ought to look at the facts rather than believe somebody who's got a bias that is self-motivated and self-interested to get themselves elected.
Okay, and let's remind our listeners, they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully still joined for a little while longer here by the Nassau County and New York State Democratic Party Chairman Jay Jacobs.
And Go ahead, Bill. We spoke to Laura Curran too after after the mess, when the dust started to settle. And my first question to her was, what happened? What happened? And, she had a lot of answers. Well, I think what we kind of felt was, because I looked at some of the totals of the winners in those
voter turnout.
Yeah, voter turnout. And the numbers were, they didn't blow me away, that's for sure. Not knowing that a dense population like that only produced 4,000 people that went out to vote. And that candidate won. And I thought, that's all. So the idea being is that, of course, reassessment was a debacle only because it always will be. There will never be people happy and, so we kind of, and it's assumption because I'm not, I'm speculating here, but I think that people were angry about it. They didn't know who to blame, but when you're the captain of the ship, it's your fault. That's all there is to it.
I think you're on the right track, but I can add something.
We think that it's not that people went out and voted against her. They weren't that mad at her. They weren't mad enough to go out and vote for her, her opponent. But they were mad enough to not go and vote at all.
Yeah, I guess deflation of the base versus inflation of the Republican base based on the issues that they were kind of campaigning on.
Yeah, I would look at it this way also. We polled after the election. Because I want to know what the heck happened. Going into the election, there was never a poll done, and we used top of the line polling company we've used for years, always been pretty close to spot on. There was never a poll, even 8 days before the election, where Laura Curran was less than 20 points ahead of Bruce Blakeman. Last poll was 53-33. She was over 50%. How do you lose an election like that? Yeah, right. I wanted to know. So the polling company, at their cost, they didn't charge us, of course, they went out and they repolled actual voters.
Okay.
And actually went back to a lot of the people they had spoken to before, particularly people who were unsure and wanted to see what happened. Late deciding voters cut overwhelmingly for Blakeman. People got their tax bills in the mail that last week. Think about that, your school tax.
There you go. Yeah.
So that accentuated the assessment issue. The other thing that happened was Republicans came out in larger numbers than ever before in comparison in odd year elections. And why? When speaking to Republican voters, we found a lingering anger. Remember I said to you what they like to focus on, either scare them or make them angry. Right. A lingering anger over Donald Trump's 2020 loss, which they believe was stolen, as crazy as that is, and the belief that Biden was not a legitimate president. And then you had these ballot initiatives in New York State to expand absentee voting and things like that, which the Republicans, actually was the conservatives with a $3 million grant from Louder. Ron Louder gave $3 million, I believe illegally, frankly, to the Conservative Party, or actually the Conservative Party used it illegally because they used it out of their housekeeping account, which you can't do, to mount a campaign to scare Republican voters that now the Democrats were looking to institutionalize the rigging of elections. So all of that happening in the last week jacked up Republicans' turnout and got people a bit more angry about assessment, because now you got your bill and you see it in hard cash, so to speak. Right. And I think that went against us.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, that makes sense. Having done the postmortem, and you and the folks that you speak about it are as obviously concerned about getting the right answers as anyone would be, of course. So that certainly is enlightening. And I know people have been talking about those ballot initiatives, and I believe that there might be another one coming up in this cycle with the environmental bond. And knowing how maybe this would be different potentially than last time, even though I think the environmental one of the protection kind of measures did pass last go around, even despite the turnout on the other measures, the ballot kind of initiatives and stuff like that. But I guess, in the time that we have here left, then let's transition to, I guess, this upcoming cycle. Now that, we have some of those lessons and we saw what happened there, we do have obviously the governor, the top of the ticket, Kathy Hochul. The field as now primarily has Tom Suozzi, a Long Island Congress member, as well as a Brooklyn city elected official, public advocate Jumaane Williams, more from the left, Suozzi more from the right, at least as it's said. So, what will be applied, I guess, in this process? Well, I should say not just those races, but of course the New York State legislature, which, supermajorities are on the line, and the whole congressional delegation as well. So I guess, big picture, and then maybe we can get a little bit more nitty gritty as, we go.
Sure. And big picture, my sense is that Kathy Hochul will win the Democratic primary overwhelmingly. Her poll numbers reflect that currently. She's doing a great job. And those poll numbers, just every time we poll, they keep going up. So I see that as good. I have a hope that Tom Suozzi decides to run for re-election in his congressional district. He's a friend of mine. I've chaired his campaigns every time he's run in the past, and he's a personal friend of mine. I've advised him from the get-go not to run in this race. And, look, he's taken a different course at the matter, but I keep going in an effort to get him out of this race. I think if it's between Jumaane Williams, who does come from the far left, he'll be good for about 20-25%. He might get to 30% of the vote in the Democratic primary. That tends to be the far left vote, mainly out of the city. But Kathy Hochul, I think, will win. And then I think she'll go on to beat whomever the Republican is in November. We have an overwhelming registration advantage, and I think she's been a good governor with a good budget. The economy is going to be improving. COVID will be behind us. And remember something, every one of these elections, when you're going against an incumbent, it's always about the challenger convincing the voting public of the reason that they need to fire the incumbent. Well, so far, Kathy Hochul hasn't given anybody any reason for the public to fire her. So I see her getting elected, and I see us maintaining the majorities in the state Senate and the Assembly. Whether they're as strong a majority or not, I cannot tell. Congress, I hope we pick up a few seats as well. We currently, we're dropping one seat overall because of population, but I think that the number of seats that are held by Democrats will increase substantially, and I think that'll be good.
Okay.
Do you think the immigration issue is what maybe skewed the census, and that's why we're losing? You're going to lose a seat? I
don't know that answer. I know that, look, we did have 300,000 people leave New York State last year, and that doesn't help us. Right. We've got to stop that from happening, and I think we will. But, I don't think it's the immigration issue. I just think that, people are favoring warmer climate states with lower taxes in some cases. And so, and where economic growth may be. So you look at states like Arizona and Florida that are growing. Texas, has been doing well. The Northeast has been having its problems, and I think we need to turn that around.
Well, hasn't that always been the case? The old mantra, you make your money in New York and you spend it in Florida, or someplace else.
Plenty of nice places to spend your money in New York, though. We should always remind folks, especially out here on Long Island.
Trust me, they do. They spend plenty in New York. I don't think,
Of course. But just in the little bit of time we have remaining here, then. So I know, like you said, that the governor, is in a strong position. Obviously made history. Obviously coming out of a tumultuous kind of, I guess, end to the previous administration, we'll say. But having now, this budget session underway and having a lot of people, we'll say, who, want to make sure that their districts, are, getting everything that they can. It's been interesting to watch so far. But in terms of Congressman Swazi, who I'll say is my district, and I'm certainly personally interested in what's going to happen where I live in terms of representation. But knowing that he's talked to us directly about, how much of it's a swing district and, knowing that it's tough sometimes for a moderate, he says, to win those districts. So I guess, maybe that was kind of where we were going to segue to, to close anyway, in terms of keeping both the progressive, kind of bases happy and solidified, the same way I guess the Republicans have to keep conservatives and moderates, to the extent happy. How do you do that, I guess, with your conference and members and voters?
Well, first and foremost, I want to make sure that voters generally understand that the far left and the socialists and the rest are a portion of our party, and they're not anywhere near a majority portion. They're a small portion of our party, much the same as on the right, you've got some fairly radical groups being a portion of the Republican Party. And by the way, I'll take our far left over their far right any day. Mm-hmm. What I say to people all the time is this. We're a big tent, and the far left, even the socialists, have a place in the Democratic Party and a part to play in that they present with passion and sometimes creativity ideas that we in the middle, and I count myself as a moderate progressive, we need to hear and we need to consider. And very often they serve to push us a little bit further than we might otherwise go, out of our comfort zone, if you will, mm-hmm. and make for moves that are necessary in our society to improve life for everybody and improve our country, frankly, in ways that we might not otherwise do without some prodding and pushing. But they shouldn't be driving the train, because I just don't think that they understand that this is a nation that is really center left, maybe center right, depends on the mood and the time, but it is sure not far right and it is sure not far left. Roosevelt very well understood how fast to move and how far to go. And that's what we need to remember. We can make progress. We can move in a progressive direction. But if we go too fast, too far, we'll get thrown out. Then you get the Republicans back in and we take a few steps back. I don't want to go there. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is hold everybody together. We need to respect each other, listen to each other, and not fight out of anger, argue vigorously, certainly. But remember, we're all members of the same family.
Okay. We've gotten, we were talking about this before we came on the show, that, the idea that when a vote happens in Congress now, there's, not even one Republican voted for this thing. So it's not a matter of we are totally out of kilter. We're 100. I call it the upside down. I don't know if you've seen that show, Stranger Things, where they go into the upside down. When patriots are traitors and traitors are patriots, and nobody knows the definition of words anymore, and we don't have a common, when you walk in a building, you hold the door for the person behind you. I don't care who they are, whether they're a big burly construction worker or a little old lady. That's the world I grew up in. And, it seems to be disintegrating. It really does. People ask me, well, why do you wear a mask? And I half jokingly tell them because I don't want people to think I'm a Republican.
Yeah. I think people are pessimistic right now and have every good reason to be pessimistic right now. I'm optimistic. And I think that we're getting to a point. I don't see, some people say we're going to go to civil war. When's it going to all end? I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I'll give you that. But I think it will get better. I think that what's important is that people once again, and I don't know what it'll take, but I think that people once again have to understand what the meaning of America really is beyond the borders that define it as a country on a map. Mm-hmm. And once we get to a point where we understand the commonality of our purpose here, on this earth, and the importance of democracy and the importance of our nation as a leader among nations and among peoples, then I think we'll begin that coming together again, a bit more of that bipartisanship that we used to see in foreign policy and that's been lacking right now. We'll begin to start again. Again, as I say, I don't know what it's going to take, but I have every reason to believe, looking at and reading history, that we will get there, and people will once again have that civility that you talk about and I practice and believe in very much so. Yeah. And we need to get there.
I mean, we got to a point
officials to really move us in that direction.
Yeah, we got to a point where we're a nation of immigrants who hates immigrants. I mean, I don't know, how.
And to your point of hopefully seeing, people come together and have, rational discussions about things that impact the country. We all saw the announcement just a couple of days ago of the Supreme Court justice who's going to step down, and now there's going to be a whole high-profile attempt to pass through a nominee through both houses to replace them, who the president has said will be an African American woman, as he promised on the campaign. So just do you have any, like, do the members of the state, do they have any input in terms of this process, or just how do you hope to at least cajole people to have a civil discourse around this?
Well, I mean, look, there are people who look for any reason to be angry, upset, and condemn. On the one hand, they had nothing to say when Trump was doing it. Republicans in the Nassau legislature had nothing to say when Mangano did things, and were very vocal when Laura Curran was doing very much the same sorts of things governmentally. And now, again, they're silent under Blakeman. It's amazing. So, look, there's politics, and you have to accept the politics of it. I think what's going to happen to improve this country is going to come from the bottom up. It's the people. And they are going to begin clamoring for a new way and a better way of things to happen. You can't stop nastiness among political people, but I will tell you this. It's so interesting. All of us who are in the political world, we think everything is important, and we think everybody is watching and everybody cares. They don't. There's a reason why only 28% or so of the people vote in off-year elections, like for the county executive in the last race. Think about that. It's over 50% in the gubernatorial, and sometimes close to 70 or so percent in the presidential. Right. Why? Because people don't care about these small bore issues. Right. They care about the bigger things. I asked a friend of mine recently, do you vote often in the sanitation commission elections? Do you ever vote in those? Absolutely not. I said, why? Because they don't care. Well, that's similar in many of these other elections. Voters care about what's going on in their households. They care about their children. They care about education of their children. They care about the dollars they're going to make and the community they're going to live in, and their public safety and those kinds of things. And beyond that, they look at the rest of us in politics as, frankly, a bunch of fools that are self-interested and sometimes corrupt. And that's a shame, because that really doesn't define the folks in politics that I know on the large scale. I got a few of them I could certainly point to, I guess. But overall, that's not what you see, and they're well-intentioned. And even folks on the Republican side, I think many of them are well-intentioned. I have very good relationships with Republicans, quite frankly. We disagree, but personally very good relationships. But so I just think this is going to come from the bottom up. It's not going to come from the top down. It just can't. And we'll see over the next couple of years, I think, a dramatic improvement. But the media has a part to play in this too. Fox News has a part to play in this too. Even our friends at MSNBC have to watch what it is that we say on the air and what we promote on the air, because that's helping the divisiveness. Never mind, you get on social media and the crazies come out. Forget Twitter.
I don't think that people are aware the power that propaganda has, and especially people who are taken by it. The idea that Devin Nunes is going to quit Congress to become the chief or the CEO of a media empire for who that should tell everyone that these people believe there's more power in propaganda than there is in Congress.
Well, and
because
that's the concern
working.
of seeing the legitimization of groups. I know you've spoken about this in terms of like the Proud Boys and these other kind of alt-right groups, which, say what you want about, again, DSA and some other folks, they're not on FBI terrorist watch list, for, again, some of the anti-Semitic or other kind of group kind of speech and potential actions. So certainly, it's a shame to see where it devolves to, but I do like the idea of ending with a little bit of optimism, Jay, and knowing, like I said, that things can be better. And hopefully people, if they can't come to agreements on big topics like the Supreme Court justices, hopefully they'll come together on getting their garbage, taken out and by the right way, people, the right way.
But actually, I was going to ask you a question of, you talk about uniting and people were talking about, we have to unite. And okay, well, when you got nobody on that side of the aisle, that not even one vote, how do you talk about uniting? So in that vein, I'd like to ask you a question. There were 127 lawmakers that signed on to Louis Gohmere's bill in Texas when he wanted to disavow the votes of 5 million Texans. What do you think should happen to them? I mean, I think they violated their oath, personally.
I do too. And I think that history will judge them harshly. But let's remember, in our American history, there have been a lot of examples of people acting badly, people in high places acting badly. And we've overcome that. That's what democracies do. I take a look at Liz Cheney's seat in Wyoming, and I wonder how that's going to turn out in terms of the primary that takes place there. A Republican will win, and I'm hoping she wins that primary, and I'm hoping that some other people surprise some of these leaders. And I also think what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of far-right crazies, Trumpian crazies, winning primaries over more moderate Republicans across the country. And that's going to give Trump and a lot of his people great strength. They're going to be thumping their chests, overjoyed that their people won. And then it's going to come the general election, and Democrats, surprisingly, in many, many of these seats, are going to beat them. And that will demonstrate that, you can have the crazies win a Republican primary, but you're not going to have the votes to govern. And the Republican Party will wake up. That's when you're going to see more Republican senators breaking ranks, more members of the House breaking ranks, because what they were anticipating in 2022, I am hopeful and I believe, because I believe in the American people, I'm hopeful they will see didn't go exactly the way that Donald Trump has designed it to go. So at the end of the day, as I say, it's going to come from the bottom up. Americans are sensible people. Winston Churchill had a great quote. And maybe I'll end it there. And he said that something to the effect that democracy is the worst form of government next to all of the others. Right. And I think that is so true. Yeah. It's dirty. Yeah. It doesn't work properly all the time. Yep. And I also say that he did say one more thing he said that I enjoyed is ultimately, in the end, after trying, Americans do the right thing after trying every alternative. That's where we are right now. Yeah, that's where I think.
Fair enough. So we'll get there eventually by process of elimination. Yeah. And again, good speaking with you and good knowing, how your role is and the members of your delegation, their role in this as well here on Long Island. Especially.
And we've got to get
thank you so much for your time.
Get you to promise to come back and talk to us as things because they're changing every day.
Will do. And I thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for carving out the time to spend with us. And
most definitely.
We'll see you soon.
Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care and be well.
Be well.
Thank you.
Okay. So, hey, I mean, that was a good conversation. He had a bunch to say just about, what the party's doing. And of course, I think his characterizations are perfect. I haven't seen Republicans offer any pluses, certainly nothing for the betterment of people in general. It's always just a complaint or she did this, they did that, they did the other. Yeah.
So I hear you. And obviously, that is his job. And I'm sure the Republican county and, state chair people would probably push back and disagree with a lot of the characterizations. But I see, again, he is speaking to Long Islanders. He's speaking to a lot of folks, who basically fit a profile similar to you, Bill. And, I think he can connect with folks. I know there's been discussion about does he alienate, some of whether it's the younger, more radical generations and, folks from the city. And is that, the right move for him to be making, politically to protect some of the members who are in the more, kind of purple districts? That's, not for me, for people to decide themselves. But point is that, he definitely was very open and, definitely gave us a lot of time and details and, kind of top of the mind thoughts, which I kind of wasn't sure, having been the first time talking to a party, chairperson,
right,
how much they keep it close to the vest versus, kind of trying to relitigate and just talk about it in a more open, free form way. But yeah, we, look forward to talking to the Republican chairperson. I know that they probably are, quite happy about the outcomes of the last election cycle versus
he makes a good
Jay
point.
Jacobs is.
He makes a good point, though. There's one way, yes, you can win an election, but do you have enough votes to lead, will that support
and winning elections isn't being able to govern correctly. Just because you campaign well, that doesn't mean, you can handle.
Well, Nassau County, perfect example, right? They were telling us forever that it's the safest town in the county. And then all of a sudden, an election comes up. We're going to make it safer. And you say, oh, well, okay.
How do you make it safer than first?
Right,
I mean, right. I get you have data points, but like I said, and that's why and we're bringing up, like we brought up to Blakeman, the county executive, like we brought up to, Ryder, the commissioner of the police, we'll bring up to anyone just the fact that we're just trying to make sense of it. Because when people hear one thing and then they hear something else, and this is not like it's coming from someone from some nonprofit in the far radical left. It's coming from the police commissioner.
Right.
So how do we square it? And that goes back to COVID, everything else, where we can't accept the basic, kind of objective facts. Then how do we really have a discussion?
Yeah. How
that
do
means
you,
anything?
How do you communicate if people don't know the definitions of the words?
Yeah. No, most definitely.
It's
but
not to mention all the again, we've spoken about this before, the idea that we're really operating on sound bites. People get a 5-word thing and that's it, okay. And that's their mantra and they go with it. What's interesting to me in a sense is you've heard the whole thing about Joe Rogan and you heard that Neil Young is
trying to pull his catalog
right
in protest.
It's interesting because long form discussion appears to be having made a big comeback. I mean, you must know. I'll bet you 10 people probably that have podcasts.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much. Even musicians now they got a podcast. They're talking about music.
Exactly. Exactly. And I did a thing in college which I went to late. I was late, but I did a thing where I did an impersonation of Henry Ward Beecher for Democracy and Performance over at the school. And
at Hofstra, right?
Yeah. It was interesting. But I'm getting off into the tulips again. But just, the idea of the Lincoln Douglas debates, people would show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and they'd be there till 1. And then they would take a break and eat lunch and come back and stay till 7 or 8 at night listening to two men discuss. I think those people were more informed than we are, and yet look at all the avenues of communication we have available to us.
Well, I would say, to your point, I think you raise is definitely valid, but I think the fact is that they had far less distractions than we do in the modern day.
True, but I also think to some degree they had far more interest. Distractions
that could be. No, you're right. Like I said, I think there was more, civic responsibility.
Yeah.
When you look, I haven't looked in a while, but when you look at historical voting rates, granted, keep in mind that a lot of people weren't allowed to legally vote, being women and non-proper, all that type of stuff that we know for a while. But still, as more people became, enfranchised. Mm-hmm. The rates were high because it meant a lot. It took a lot to get the vote. That's why you still see in communities in the South where it took until the post 60 civil rights movement to get the right to vote and to be able to actually use it without barriers of access. Mm-hmm. That their voting rates are through the roof compared to where we are in places that maybe you take for granted that it's this party's going to win or that party's going to win. What's the point anyway? It's certainly going to be important to consider, like we said, knowing the Supreme Court kind of decision that's going to come out of here, knowing that there's a lot of discussion about whether it's the John Lewis the Voting Rights Act or other pieces of legislation that for better or worse, as Jay Jacobs admitted, and he's someone who needs to acknowledge this, is that people aren't always plugged in to the 24-hour news cycle that people who follow this stuff are. Both the electeds, their staffers, people who are news junkies, like ourselves, and people who care, about the world around them. People might not be able to show that care by looking at the news as much as we do. So, point being is trying to get them to just find the information where they're at and get it in a way that's, makes sense, easy to comprehend, but, doesn't miss the important details that people need to know. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
I think to put things into perspective, though, did you ever see Ken Burns' documentary about the Civil War?
Yeah.
Have you seen it? Right. So most of it is based on letters that came from the battlefield.
Oh yeah, yeah. They weren't TikToking their wife back home. They were sending letters. Yeah,
and these people had. I mean, the letters were eloquent, and when they had the letter, you could see it almost looked like calligraphy. The penmanship that they had, and meanwhile we sit here and think, because of where we are, we're the future, that we're superior to that in knowledge and in And the thing is we've slowly been dumbed down to the point where a lot of people can't even put a sentence together.
Well, I mean, not one that is, I guess,
it's
got a lot of context or information, and it's just like I said. How many characters or less?
Yeah, so it's amazing.
Characters or less.
There used to be a thing. There was a thing on email, I guess, and they would send it around and it'd say, "Remember when they said that your great uncle Fred only graduated 8th grade?" And we automatically say, well, the guy only had an 8th grade education. He can't be that bright, Well, then they printed the test that Uncle Fred had to take to graduate 8th grade. And if I could answer 3 of those questions, I would consider myself lucky.
And the fact is that they had different sets of knowledge, good luck getting someone who's, an Ivy League accountant to figure out how to, get the most milk out of a cow.
Yeah, well, how many apples
Jebediah would get you right.
Right. How many apples in a peck if it's this size, blah, blah, and they knew how to answer so they were obviously schooled. I mean, I don't think some of those things you find out by stumbling into them. Someone has to, but it just illustrates that idea that here we are in a technology. We've got it all, and not even yet. But so much more than they did. They had pencil and paper, and yet their ability to write and communicate was, I think, far surpasses what your average Joe today, is doing.
Like I said, there's all types of intelligence and
this is true too.
Knowledge, but overall, trying to get people to plug back into the civic engagement spheres, I think in some ways, it has gotten better. If you look at folks who are in high school now, before I think you used to see more people, maybe they get into college, they get involved in some issue and, they spend a little time in it. But I see now, kids who are in high school, being organizers, not just kind of activists, and whatever the issue it is, again, the point is that it's just interesting that the internet, I think, has empowered those who do crack through and see that maybe there are some things in life that are pretty important and that they kind of find themselves connecting to, basically advocating for, that they can do that and that they can, kind of be pretty successful, by using those means. So, I don't necessarily always, like when, and not to say that I don't do it myself, but we say, the people don't care anymore, they used to care like the old days. Right. But like I said,
it's a broad stroke. Trying to get,
it is. And that's fair. That's what it is. Radio is, takes and hot takes and everything like that. But, there's truth to it, of course. But I just think that trying to figure out how we can get people, like I said, whether it's you care about, trying to help your local food pantry or trying to help, the senior center, whatever it is, nothing even controversial, other topics. But the point is just getting people to realize that you can do this. It's not strange. The tools are there. If you want to do it, here you go.
Well, I think that we've been
find your way to it to caring about your community later, maybe when you have a family and kids and taxes.
Yeah, but
eventually.
But I think part of it is that every people feel like, well, they want me to get involved in politics means I have to do something, and I think that's a misnomer. Nobody's asking you to do anything. They're asking you to be informed. That's all. If you feel so compelled to reach into your pocket or to go out and volunteer for something, great. But if you don't, that's okay too. Just know what the heck is going on. And you and I have said this to our audiences over and over and over again. The local politics is what really is going to affect you,
And that's the thing. You need to know You don't need to, be on every, mailing list and go to everything, events and stuff like that. But when push comes to shove and there is an issue that is impacting you and your family and your community, you need to be informed about it and understand the context of who's telling you what, and do they have, additional kind of interest in this conversation? Because, you have to worry about your own, and like I said, your family's, probably first. But I don't know. Like I said, it certainly, I think, was a pretty interesting discussion there. Certainly, to see that the polling company that they paid for, which got it wrong a bit, we'll say the first time, it's good to see, that I guess they have that kind of agreement where they'll kind of then do the postmortem and be like, let's see, how we kind of got it wrong. But seeing, as I had heard, that ballot initiative issue, where, the Conservative Party, I mean, he alleged some things there in terms of, the kind of legality of how they went about it. But knowing that, this is a big issue. They're already a minority in the state, organized around, voting kind of policies that, might be perceived as helping Democrats more than Republicans. And look at the turnout. That bail reform, there's the realities of policies. But most people, again, they're thinking about the perceptions of them.
Definitely. Right.
That's why you need the information, because then you can crack through and say, okay, well, valid points here, maybe not so much there. How do we make things better? Not just, yell about it for the sake of, yelling about it more or less. So I don't know. I like I said, definitely pretty interesting. And, I know there's other news that's been happening this week, of course. And, we certainly are going to, post when we get the word on what the court's decided. That appellate court in Brooklyn, after initially a judge who was in the state Supreme Court out of Nassau County, ruled that the mask mandate was unconstitutional or whatever it may be. The point is that, and this is following Blakeman's executive orders that we spoke to him about, that then it had to go to the appellate court. They're, coming to a decision today. I think that should be a final decision. So hopefully the back and forth for parents can end. Regardless of how you feel about masks, I don't think anybody wants people to have one thing said one day, then one thing said the other day, and then keep going back and forth. It's tough enough right now for parents and students. I just think people want to have some, kind of consistency. So hopefully this gives people that, and hopefully, public health is, preserved whichever way. But I don't know. Like I said, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on the snow that's coming in apparently this weekend. I don't know where the forecast numbers were in your neck of the woods, but they keep changing day by day over here where, it's, it's going to be 3 inches. Now it's going to be 12 inches. Then it's going to be 4 inches. Then it's going to be 10 inches.
We can thank computer models for that,
Well, I do like, though, for the first time I'm hearing, meteorologists say this is a low confidence forecast, which I like as like a data person, confidence intervals, we can get into linear regressions, all that type of stuff. The point is, let's qualify our information.
Translation.
If we don't think it's right.
I'm not very sure that this matters.
Exactly. The computer says a lot of things. I'm going to go with this.
Well, you know what? And the other thing that we forget with computer models is that it's information put in by humans.
Only good is the data that's entered.
Bingo.
Right,
GIGO, I think they called it. Garbage in and garbage out.
Oh yeah.
So
bit about that.
And again, it's a crapshoot. They have to. Well, here's a model. It looks like that's possible. Okay, we'll go with that because they have been saying it could go east and dump all that snow in the water. Going a little, So
well, to that point, I think the governor, she was scheduled to appear in Suffolk County today in terms of storm preparations, probably with the county exec, some other officials out there. I don't know if that's changed because it may have been that they changed the forecast to be more west of a problem now, but we'll see. So everyone just please stay safe.
Well, tell everybody where they can check up on us.
They can, of course, follow the latest on this week's Long Island News at TWLI News on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you find it. And, of course, you can find this podcast wherever you get those too. So another good one in the books here, Bill. Good stuff always talking with you and getting some information with our listeners here.
Okay, and we'll see you next time. But, the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move on out of here. We thank you for joining us and remind you can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 o'clock right here on 90.3 WHPC.